The rain hit Eleanor's face like cold needles as she bent over the chestnut mare's hoof. Her hands already numb from hours of working in the downpour that had started before dawn and showed no signs of stopping. It was September 1878 in Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory, and the autumn storm had rolled in fierce and unrelenting, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud and making every task 3 times harder than it should be. Eleanor Whitfield had inherited her father's blacksmith shop 6 months ago when pneumonia took him, and she'd been fighting ever since to prove she could handle the work just as well as any man. Today was testing that resolved more than most. She'd been shoeing horses since first light, working through a backlog of ranchers who needed their animals ready for the cattle drive north. The rain soaked through her leather apron and the wool shirt beneath, plastering her dark hair to her neck despite the wide-brimmed hat she wore. Her fingers ached as she shaped another shoe, the hammer strikes ringing out in rhythm with the drumming rain. The mare she was working on kept shifting nervously, made skittish by the storm, and Eleanor had to stop twice to calm her before she could continue fitting the shoe. She was on her 4th horse of the day, a big roan gelding belonging to the Thompson Ranch, when she heard the sound of boots squelching through mud behind her. Eleanor didn't look up, assuming it was just another impatient rancher come to check on their horse. But then a deep voice cut through the rain. "You are going to catch your death out here." Eleanor straightened, wiping rain from her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of soot across her cheek. The man standing a few feet away was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy, denim pants and a chambray shirt under a leather vest, but his hat was pulled low against the rain. She'd never seen him before, and Cheyenne wasn't so big that strangers went unnoticed. "I've got work to do," Eleanor said, turning back to the horse. "These animals need shoeing whether it rains or not." "I can see that," the man said, moving closer. "But you are working in conditions that would break most men. At least let me help." Eleanor felt a flash of irritation. She'd heard variations of this speech 100 times since taking over the smithy. Men who thought she needed saving, men who thought she couldn't handle the work, men who couldn't believe a woman of 23 could swing a hammer and shape iron. "I have been managing fine on my own, thank you." "I am not questioning your skill," the man said, and there was something in his tone that made Eleanor pause. "I am questioning your stubbornness. You have been out here for hours, I would wager. Your hands are shaking from cold and fatigue. I am just offering to help, not to take over." Eleanor looked at him properly then, really looked. His face was weathered but kind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. Those eyes were a warm brown, steady and sincere. There was no condescension in his expression, just genuine concern. She realized her hands were indeed shaking, had been for the last hour at least. "What kind of help are you offering?" she asked cautiously. The man glanced around the muddy yard, then up at the relentless sky. "Well, first I am going to build you some kind of shelter so you are not working completely exposed. Then I will hold the horses steady for you while you work. These animals are nervous in the storm, and it would go faster if someone kept them calm." Eleanor wanted to refuse on principle, but the practical part of her, the part that had learned smithing from her father and knew when to accept assistance, recognized the sense in what he was saying. "All right," she said finally, "but I am paying you for your time." "No need," the man said, already moving toward a stack of lumber near the side of the shop. "Consider it neighborly kindness." "I insist," Eleanor said firmly. "I pay for labor like anyone else." He paused, then nodded with what might have been respect. "Fair enough." "I am Jack Morrison, by the way. Just came into town 2 days ago looking for work." "Eleanor Whitfield," she replied, gesturing toward the shop. "There should be some canvas tarps inside and posts you can use, if you are serious about building shelter, that is." Jack Morrison proved to be serious about a great many things. Within 30 minutes, working with the kind of efficient competence that spoke of years of hard living and practical problem-solving, He had constructed a crude but effective shelter over Eleanor's work area. He'd driven posts into the muddy ground and stretched canvas overhead, creating a roof that blocked the worst of the rain. It wasn't perfect, water still blew in from the sides, but it was a vast improvement over working completely exposed. "Better?" Jack asked, ducking under the canvas beside her. "Much," Eleanor admitted. The relief of not having rain pounding directly on her head and shoulders was immediate. "Thank you. Now, which horse is next?" Jack moved toward the roan she'd been working on, reaching out to stroke the animal's neck. The horse, which had been tossing its head and stamping nervously, immediately began to calm under Jack's touch. He had capable hands, Eleanor noticed, gentle but firm. "Easy now, boy. We are going to get you fixed up. Just stand easy." Eleanor picked up her tools, feeling the difference immediately. With Jack holding the horse steady, speaking in a low, soothing voice, the gelding stood calmly while she worked. She could focus entirely on the shoeing, on the precise placement and shaping that the work required, without constantly fighting to keep the animal still. The shoe went on in half the time it would have taken her alone. "You are good with horses," Eleanor said as she moved on to the next hoof. "Grew up on a ranch in Texas," Jack replied, still stroking the roan's neck. "Been around horses my whole life. They respond to calm confidence mostly. Let them know you are not going to hurt them, that you know what you are doing." "Why did you leave Texas?" There was a pause, and Eleanor glanced up to see something complicated cross Jack's face. "My family's ranch went under 2 years ago. Drought killed our herd and we could not recover. My father died shortly after, I think from a broken heart as much as anything else. My mother and sisters moved east to live with relatives, but I could not see myself in a city. So I have been drifting, working ranches where I can find work, trying to figure out what comes next." Eleanor heard the loss in his voice, recognized it because she carried the same weight herself. "I am sorry about your father. I lost mine this past spring, also to illness." "And he left you the smithy," Jack said. "It wasn't a question. He did." Much to the consternation of several men in town who think a woman has no business working iron. Eleanor fitted the last shoe on the roan, driving the nails with practiced precision. "But my father taught me everything he knew, and I am not about to let his legacy die just because some people think I should be home sewing or teaching school." Jack laughed, a warm sound that somehow cut through the gloom of the rain. "Something tells me you would be terrible at sewing." "Dreadful," Eleanor agreed, allowing herself a small smile. "I once tried to make a dress and ended up with something that looked like a flour sack with sleeves." My father laughed for a week. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. Jack would bring the next horse under the shelter, calm it with his quiet voice and steady hands, and Eleanor would do her work. They talked while she worked, conversation flowing naturally between hammer strikes. Jack told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to break horses and mend fences, about the pride his father had taken in their ranch even when times got hard. Eleanor told him about learning the smithy trade, about how her father had ignored the neighbors' disapproval and taught her anyway, because she'd been the one who showed interest and aptitude. Not because she was a girl, but because she was his child. The rain continued to pour, turning the afternoon dark and gray, but under their makeshift shelter, Eleanor felt warmer than she had all day. It wasn't just the relief of being out of the direct downpour, though that helped. It was the companionship, the ease of working alongside someone who understood physical labor and didn't question her right to do it. Jack didn't hover or try to take over, didn't make suggestions about how she should be doing things differently. He simply held the horses, kept them calm, and let her work. By the time she finished the last horse, a pretty paint mare belonging to the widow Henderson, the light was fading and Eleanor's arms felt like lead. She straightened slowly, pressing a hand to the small of her back. "That is the last one for today," she said, surprised to feel a pang of disappointment. The work had been hard, but Jack's presence had made it bearable, even pleasant. "You should get inside, warm up, get some dry clothes on," Jack said, releasing the mare. "You have been soaked through for hours." Eleanor nodded, suddenly aware of how cold she was now that the work had stopped. Her teeth wanted to chatter and her fingers were so stiff she could barely bend them. "What about you? Do you have a place to stay?" "I have been boarding at the hotel," Jack said. "Nothing fancy, but it is dry." They stood there for a moment, rain drumming on the canvas above them, and Eleanor found herself not wanting him to leave. It was a strange feeling, unsettling in its intensity. She'd been so focused on keeping the smithy running, on proving herself, that she hadn't had time for personal connections. But something about Jack Morrison had slipped past her defenses without her even noticing. "I owe you for your help today," Eleanor said finally. "Let me at least buy you dinner. There is a decent restaurant down the street, Molly's Place. They serve a good steak." Jack's face brightened. "I would like that. Give me an hour to clean up and I will meet you there." "An hour," Eleanor agreed. She watched him walk away through the rain, his figure growing indistinct in the downpour, and felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. It had been so long since she'd felt anything but exhaustion and determination. This felt like possibility. Eleanor hurried into the small living quarters attached to the back of the smithy, stripping off her soaked clothes and wrapping herself in a blanket while she heated water on the stove. The space was modest but comfortable, 2 rooms that her father had built when he first established the shop 15 years ago. Eleanor had grown up here, in this practical little home that smelled of coal smoke and iron filings. After her mother had died of fever when Eleanor was 12, it had been just her and her father, learning the trade together, building a life around the forge. She washed quickly in the heated water, scrubbing the soot and grime from her skin, then dressed in the one nice outfit she owned. A simple blue cotton dress that her father had insisted she buy for church services, even though she rarely attended anymore. Her hair was a disaster, tangled and damp, but she combed it out as best she could and pinned it back. When she looked in the small mirror above her washstand, she barely recognized herself. She looked almost feminine, almost like the kind of woman who might meet a man for dinner without it being unusual. The thought made her nervous. What was she doing? Jack Morrison was a drifter, someone passing through town looking for work. He'd probably move on in a week or two, chasing the next job, the next opportunity. Getting attached would be foolish. But even as she thought it, Eleanor knew she was already more interested than she should be. Molly's Place was warm and bright, lanterns glowing against the dark evening. The rain had finally slowed to a drizzle, and Eleanor made her way down the muddy street carefully, holding her skirts up to keep them from trailing in the muck. Jack was already there, waiting outside, and Eleanor felt her breath catch slightly when she saw him. He'd cleaned up, changed into fresh clothes, and without the shadow of his hat and the grime of work, he was genuinely handsome. More than that, he smiled when he saw her, a real smile that reached his eyes. "You clean up nice," he said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, not that you did not look fine before, just you look very nice now too." Eleanor laughed, feeling some of her nervousness ease. "I understand. You also look considerably less muddy than earlier." They went inside, and Molly herself, a stout woman in her 50s who had run the restaurant for 20 years, showed them to a corner table. The place was busy with the evening crowd, mostly ranch hands and workers from the rail yards, but Molly found them a spot with relative privacy. "Good to see you out and about, Eleanor," Molly said warmly. "You have been working yourself to the bone these past months. It is about time you took an evening for yourself." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm but nodded. "Thank you, Molly. We will have 2 of the steak dinners, if you please." "Coming right up, dear." Molly bustled away, leaving them alone. Jack leaned back in his chair, studying Eleanor with open curiosity. "How long have you been running the smithy on your own?" 6 months, Eleanor said, "though I had been doing much of the work even before my father died." His health had been declining for a year or more, though he tried to hide it. "I think he knew he was failing and wanted to make sure I was ready to take over." "It cannot have been easy, a woman in a trade like that," Jack said carefully. "It has not been," Eleanor admitted. Some of the ranchers refused to bring their business to me at first, said they would not trust a woman to shoe their horses properly. But gradually they have come around, mostly because I do good work and charge fair prices. The ones who still object have to ride all the way to Laramie to find another blacksmith, which is a day's journey they would rather not make. Practical economics wins out over prejudice, Jack said with a slight smile. Eventually, Eleanor agreed. Though there are still plenty who make it clear they think I am unnatural. I heard Mrs. Fletcher tell her daughter just last week that I was a cautionary tale, that I would end up a lonely spinster because no man wants a wife with muscles and soot under her fingernails. Mrs. Fletcher sounds like she has too much time to worry about other people's business, Jack said, and there was an edge to his voice that surprised Eleanor. You are making your own way in the world, supporting yourself with honest work. That takes courage and strength. Any man worth his salt would recognize that. Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest, different from the warmth of the forge but no less powerful. Thank you. Not many people see it that way. Then not many people are looking properly, Jack said simply. Molly brought their meals then. Thick steaks with potatoes and greens, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. The food was good, hot, and filling, exactly what Eleanor needed after the long, cold day. She realized she was ravenously hungry, had been so focused on work that she'd barely eaten all day. So where will you look for work? Eleanor asked when she'd taken the edge off her hunger. Most of the ranches around here are winding down for the season, getting ready for winter. Jack cut a piece of steak, considering. I was hoping to find something in town, actually. Maybe work in the rail yards or at one of the feed stores. I have done enough drifting, I think. It would be good to stay in one place for a while, build up some savings, figure out what I want to do long term. Cheyenne is a good town for that, Eleanor said. It is growing fast, lots of opportunities for someone willing to work hard. What about you? Jack asked. Do you plan to keep running the smithy indefinitely? Eleanor nodded. It is my father's legacy and I am good at the work. I cannot imagine doing anything else. Maybe eventually I will be able to hire an apprentice, someone to help with the heavier work, but for now I am managing. More than managing from what I saw today, Jack said. You are an excellent blacksmith, Eleanor. Your father trained you well. They talked through the rest of dinner, conversation ranging from the practical to the personal. Eleanor learned that Jack was 26, that he loved horses more than almost anything else in the world, that he'd once wanted to breed quarter horses on his family's ranch, but that dream had died with the drought. Jack learned that Eleanor could read Latin because her mother had been educated back east and had taught her, that she had no other family left in the world, that sometimes she got lonely in the little rooms behind the smithy, but mostly she was too tired to notice. When they finally left the restaurant, the rain had stopped completely and stars were beginning to show through breaks in the clouds. The air was cold and clean, washed fresh by the storm. Jack walked Eleanor back to the smithy, their footsteps echoing on the wooden sidewalks. Thank you for dinner, Jack said when they reached her door, and for the company. I have not enjoyed an evening this much in a long time. Neither have I, Eleanor admitted, and thank you for your help today. You saved me from hours of misery. I was glad to do it. Jack hesitated, then added, Eleanor, would it be all right if I came by tomorrow? I could help you around the smithy if you need it. I know you do not need help with the actual smithing, but maybe there are other tasks, heavy lifting or wood splitting or things like that. Eleanor knew she should refuse, should maintain her independence, should not get used to having him around, but she found herself nodding. I would like that. There is always work to be done and I can pay you a fair wage. We can work out the details, Jack said. Good night, Eleanor. Good night, Jack. She watched him walk away into the darkness, then let herself inside. The rooms felt smaller than usual, quieter. Eleanor prepared for bed slowly, her mind replaying the day, the easy rhythm of working alongside Jack, the warmth of dinner together, the genuine interest in his eyes when he looked at her. She told herself not to read too much into it, not to hope for something that might not be there. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, she could not quite suppress the small smile on her face. Jack returned the next morning just as Eleanor was opening the smithy, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the hotel. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her one. "You thought correctly," Eleanor said, accepting it gratefully. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly what she needed to face the day. "Thank you." They fell into a routine that felt natural, as though they had been working together for months instead of just meeting the day before. Jack proved invaluable around the smithy, handling the tasks that Eleanor normally had to do herself in addition to the actual blacksmithing. He kept the coal supplied to the forge, hauled water, organized the tools, swept out the shop. When customers came with horses, he calmed the animals and held them steady while Eleanor worked. He also proved to be an excellent judge of horseshoes, able to assess what each animal needed and prepare the shoes accordingly. "You have done this before," Eleanor observed around midday as she watched him examine a sorrel gelding's hooves with practiced efficiency. "Some," Jack admitted. "We did not have a regular farrier at our ranch, had to learn to do basic work ourselves." "I am nowhere near as skilled as you, but I know enough to be useful." "You are more than useful," Eleanor said. "You are helping me get through twice as much work in half the time." Over the following weeks, Jack became a fixture at the smithy. He found a room to rent above the feed store, cheaper than the hotel, and settled into life in Cheyenne with apparent contentment. Eleanor paid him wages from the smithy's earnings, and though he initially protested that she was paying too much, she insisted. The business had picked up considerably with Jack's help, word spreading that the Whitfield smithy now offered the fastest, most reliable service in town. But it was more than just a working relationship. Eleanor found herself looking forward to Jack's arrival each morning, to the easy conversation between tasks, to the shared meals they began taking together. Jack often brought lunch from the bakery or Molly's place, and they would eat in the small yard behind the smithy, talking about everything and nothing. Eleanor learned about Jack's childhood, about a mother who sang while she cooked and sisters who teased him mercilessly. Jack learned about Eleanor's solitary upbringing after her mother's death, about long evenings spent at the forge with her father, learning not just blacksmithing but philosophy and mathematics and literature that her educated mother had insisted on. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man," Jack said one afternoon in early October as they sat in weak sunlight, eating sandwiches. "He was," Eleanor said softly. "He never treated me like I was less because I was female. He judged people on their character and their work ethic, nothing else. I think that is part of why he taught me the trade. He knew I would need a way to support myself, and he was not about to let convention prevent me from learning." "I wish I could have met him," Jack said, and the sincerity in his voice made Eleanor's throat tighten. "He would have liked you," she said. "He appreciated people who were honest and hardworking." October slipped into November, the weather growing colder but remaining mostly clear. Eleanor realized with some surprise that she had not been this happy in years, possibly ever. The constant anxiety she had carried since her father's death, the bone-deep loneliness she had not fully acknowledged even to herself, had eased. She felt lighter, more herself. And she knew it was because of Jack. He was becoming essential to her, and not just as a worker at the smithy. She craved his company, his laugh, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and strong all at once. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing when he was not at the smithy, imagining a future that included more than just working side by side. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Jack, for his part, seemed equally affected. Eleanor noticed the way his gaze lingered on her, the way he found excuses to stand close, the way his voice softened when he said her name. There was an awareness between them, crackling like static electricity, building toward something inevitable. The moment finally came on a cold November evening. They had been working late, finishing a rush order for the Henderson Ranch, and by the time they were done, full dark had fallen and the temperature had dropped sharply. Eleanor was banking the forge for the night when she felt Jack's presence behind her. "Eleanor," he said quietly. She turned and found him closer than she'd expected, close enough to see the pulse beating at his throat, the intent in his eyes. "I need to tell you something," Jack continued, his voice low. "And if I am reading this wrong, if I am about to make a fool of myself, please just say so and we can pretend this conversation never happened." Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," Jack said simply. "Actually, I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day when you were standing in the rain looking fierce and stubborn and so damn capable. Every day since has just made it worse. Better. Both. Eleanor, I know I am just a drifter. I know I do not have much to offer, but I am asking if there is any chance you might feel the same way." Eleanor could not breathe, could not think beyond the rushing in her ears and the wild hope blooming in her chest. "You are not reading it wrong," she whispered. "Jack, I feel the same. I have been trying not to, trying to be practical, but I cannot help it. You make me happy in a way I did not know was possible." Jack's face transformed, breaking into a smile so bright it rivaled the forge. "Really?" "Really," Eleanor confirmed, and then he was kissing her, his hands gentle as they framed her face, and she was kissing him back, pouring months of loneliness and longing into the contact. He tasted like coffee and possibility, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor felt like she might float away. "I love you," Jack said again, resting his forehead against hers. "God help me, Eleanor, I love you so much." "I love you too," Eleanor said, the words feeling natural and right. "I love you, Jack Morrison." They stood there in the cooling smithy holding each other, and Eleanor felt something settle deep in her bones. This was right. This was real. After so much loss and struggle, she had found something worth holding onto. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. They were discreet in public, aware that Eleanor's position as a female blacksmith was precarious enough without adding fuel to the gossip fires. But in private, in the evenings after the smithy closed, they allowed themselves to simply be together. Jack was affectionate and attentive, and Eleanor discovered she liked being touched, like the casual intimacy of his hand on her back or his arm around her shoulders. She had spent so long being strong and independent that it was a revelation to lean on someone, to share her burdens. Jack proposed on a snowy evening in mid-December. They were in Eleanor's small sitting room, drinking tea and watching the snow fall outside the window. He knelt beside her chair, taking her soot-stained hands in his. "Marry me," he said, no preamble, just raw honesty. "I know we have not known each other long, but I am more certain of this than I have ever been of anything. I want to build a life with you, Eleanor. I want to wake up beside you every morning and work alongside you every day. I want to be your partner in every sense of the word. Will you marry me?" Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Jack, I will marry you." He kissed her then, and Eleanor tasted salt from both their tears mixed with joy. When they finally pulled apart, Jack was laughing and so was she. "I do not have a ring yet," Jack admitted. "I have been saving money, but it will be another month before I can afford something decent." "I do not need a ring," Eleanor said firmly. "I need you, that is all." But Jack was determined, and in early January he presented her with a simple gold band. It was not fancy, no diamonds or elaborate setting, but Eleanor loved it immediately. It was practical and strong like them. They were married in late January 1879, in a small ceremony at the church with Molly and a few other friends as witnesses. Eleanor wore the same blue dress she had worn to their first dinner together, and Jack wore his Sunday best. The preacher, an older man who had known Eleanor's father, smiled warmly as he pronounced them husband and wife. "Your father would have been proud," he told Eleanor afterward. "He always wanted to see you happy and settled." "He would have liked Jack," Eleanor said, glancing at her new husband who was accepting congratulations from Molly with good grace. Anyone can see that boy loves you, the preacher said, and that you love him. That is all that matters in the end. Jack moved into the rooms behind the smithy, and they settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked together during the day, partners in the business as well as in life. Jack proved to have good business sense, and he began taking on more of the customer relations and accounts, while Eleanor focused on the actual smithing. Together, they made the business more profitable than it had ever been under her father. But it was the evenings Eleanor treasured most. After the forge was banked and the tools put away, they would retreat to their small home. Jack cooked while Eleanor cleaned up, and they would eat dinner together, talking about their day, making plans for the future. Later they would sit together by the fire, Eleanor mending or reading while Jack worked on harness repairs or other small tasks. And then they would go to bed, and Eleanor would discover the sweet intimacy of marriage, the comfort of falling asleep in Jack's arms and waking to his kiss. Winter gave way to spring, and Eleanor realized she was pregnant in early April. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited to be sure before telling Jack. When she finally did, over breakfast on a Sunday morning, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, swept her into his arms, and spun her around despite her laughing protests. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "Eleanor, we are going to be parents." "We are," Eleanor confirmed, her own joy matching his. "Sometime in early November, I think." Jack insisted on taking over the heavier work at the smithy immediately, despite Eleanor's protests that she was perfectly fine and only a few weeks along. "I am not taking chances with you or the baby," he said firmly. "You can still do the detail work and the shoeing, but I am handling the heavy lifting and the big projects." Eleanor might have argued more, but secretly she was touched by his protectiveness. She had been on her own for so long, responsible for everything herself. Having someone who wanted to take care of her was still a novelty. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Eleanor continued working at the smithy well into the summer, though she had to admit that the heat of the forge combined with her expanding belly made the work increasingly challenging. Jack was endlessly patient and supportive, bringing her water and making her rest more often than she wanted to. In August, something unexpected happened. A man rode into Cheyenne looking for Jack Morrison, claiming to be a representative of Jack's family back in Texas. Eleanor was working in the smithy when the stranger arrived, and she immediately sensed something was wrong from the tension in Jack's shoulders as he spoke with the man outside. When the stranger finally left and Jack came back into the smithy, his face was pale. "What is it?" Eleanor asked immediately, setting down her hammer. "Jack, what is wrong?" "That was a lawyer," Jack said slowly, as though he could not quite believe it himself. "From Houston. Apparently my uncle, my mother's brother, passed away 2 months ago. He was wealthy, owned a shipping company, and he left a substantial inheritance to my mother and her children. The lawyer has been trying to track us down." Eleanor felt her eyes widen. "How substantial?" "Enough to buy a ranch," Jack said, his voice dazed. "A real ranch, Eleanor. Enough to buy land and stock and everything we would need. The lawyer says my portion comes to nearly $8,000. It was a staggering sum." Eleanor sank onto the bench, her hand instinctively going to her pregnant belly. "What do you want to do?" Jack knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "What do we want to do? This is not just my decision, Eleanor. We are partners. But I have to be honest, the idea of having a ranch again, of raising horses and cattle, of building something permanent for our child, that appeals to me greatly. We could sell the smithy, use that money combined with the inheritance to buy a real spread. Raise our family there." Eleanor considered, her mind racing. She loved the smithy, loved the work, but she also recognized its limitations. She could not shoe horses forever, especially not as they had more children. And the idea of a ranch, of space and land and opportunity, was appealing. More than that, she could see how much Jack wanted it, the hope lighting his eyes. "Where would we go?" she asked. "There is good grazing land north of here, up near the Montana border," Jack said eagerly. I have heard ranchers talk about it. Open range, good water, plenty of space. We could raise quarter horses, a leaner, really fine stock, and cattle too if we wanted. Build a home, a real home for our children, Eleanor smiled, squeezing his hands. Children, plural, I am hoping for at least 3 or 4, Jack said with a grin. If you are willing. I suppose I could be persuaded, Eleanor said, and then grew serious. Jack, are you sure about this? The smithy is established, it is reliable income. A ranch is a risk. I know, Jack said. But it is a risk I want to take. With you, we can build something together, Eleanor, something that is ours, our legacy for our children. Eleanor thought of her father, of the legacy he had left her in the smithy. But she also thought about what he had really taught her, about courage and independence and building a life on your own terms. He had not given her the smithy because it was a smithy, but because it was a means of supporting herself, of being self-sufficient. A ranch could be that too, and more. All right, she said. Let us do it. Let us buy a ranch. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Jack traveled north to scout land while Eleanor managed the smithy and arranged its sale. She found a buyer in a young man from Laramie who had been apprenticed to a blacksmith there and wanted his own shop. The sale was finalized in September, and Eleanor felt a pang saying goodbye to the forge and tools her father had used, but it was bittersweet rather than sorrowful. She was moving forward, not leaving behind. They found a property 70 miles north of Cheyenne, a beautiful spread of 500 acres with rolling grassland, a clear creek running through it, and a small cabin that needed work but was structurally sound. Jack negotiated the purchase through the lawyer, and by early October, just as Eleanor was getting too pregnant to travel comfortably, they moved to their new home. The cabin was rustic, 2 rooms with a loft, but it had good bones. Jack immediately began making improvements, adding a proper kitchen area and reinforcing the walls for winter. They hired 2 ranch hands, experienced men who knew cattle and horses, and Jack used part of the inheritance to buy a starter herd of cattle and several good mares for breeding. Eleanor found ranch life different from working the smithy, but no less satisfying. She could not do heavy work given her pregnancy, but she kept the household running, learned to cook more elaborate meals than the simple fare she had managed in the smithy, and began planning the garden she would plant in spring. She also discovered she had a talent for the business side of ranching, keeping meticulous records of expenses and income, negotiating with suppliers, and managing the accounts. Their first son was born on a cold November night, arriving quickly after a relatively easy labor. Jack was terrified throughout, pacing outside while the midwife from the nearest town attended Eleanor. But when he finally held his son, tears streamed down his face. He is perfect, Jack whispered, staring at the tiny face. Eleanor, he is perfect. He is, Eleanor agreed, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. They named him Samuel after her father, and he had Jack's dark hair and Eleanor's determined chin. The first year on the ranch was challenging but rewarding. They worked hard, building up the herd, training horses, making improvements to the property. Jack proved to be an excellent rancher, his years of experience serving him well. Eleanor managed the household and the business accounts while also caring for Samuel, who grew from a tiny infant into a sturdy toddler with alarming speed. In the spring of 1881, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less surprised, more prepared for what was coming. Their daughter was born in December, a tiny thing with Eleanor's dark hair and Jack's brown eyes. They named her Sarah, and she was as different from Samuel as could be, quiet where he was boisterous, contemplative where he was impulsive. The ranch continued to prosper. Jack's quarter horses gained a reputation for quality, and they began selling stock to other ranchers at good prices. The cattle herd grew steadily. By 1883, they were able to build a proper house, larger and more comfortable than the cabin, with separate bedrooms for the children and a spacious kitchen that Eleanor loved. Their third child, Another son they named James was born in 1883, and a fourth, a daughter named Mary, arrived in 1885. The house that had seemed so spacious when they built, it now rang with the sounds of children, laughter and arguments, and the constant energy of a growing family. Eleanor sometimes marveled at how much her life had changed since that rainy day in September 1878, when Jack Morrison had walked into her life and offered to build her a shelter. She had been so determined to do everything alone, to prove she did not need help from anyone. But Jack had taught her that accepting help was not weakness, that partnership and love could make her stronger, not more vulnerable. They celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in January 1889, sitting by the fire in their parlor after the children had gone to bed. Samuel was now 9, already showing interest in the horses and begging his father to teach him to break and train them. Sarah was 7, bookish and quiet, already reading at a level beyond her years. James was 5, adventurous and fearless, constantly giving Eleanor heart attacks with his climbing and exploring. And Mary was 3, sweet-natured and cheerful, the baby of the family. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Jack asked, his arm around Eleanor as they watched the flames dance. "Some days it feels like yesterday," Eleanor said. "Other days it feels like we have been together forever." "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked quietly. "Giving up the smithy, moving up here, all of it?" Eleanor turned to look at him, this man who had become the center of her world. His face showed the years, lines around his eyes and mouth, threads of silver beginning in his dark hair. But to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You gave me everything I did not know I was missing, Jack. Love, family, partnership, a home. I would not trade this life for anything." Jack kissed her then, soft and sweet. "I love you, Eleanor Morrison, just as much today as the day I married you, more even." "I love you too," Eleanor said. "Thank you for building me that shelter all those years ago. Thank you for staying." "There was never anywhere else I wanted to be," Jack said simply. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire, and Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought them here. She thought about her father, who had given her the skills and confidence to make her own way. She thought about that rainy September day when everything had changed. She thought about the risks they had taken, the challenges they had overcome, the love that had sustained them through it all. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled, but inside their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Eleanor felt only warmth and contentment. The ranch would continue to grow, their children would grow up strong and capable, and she and Jack would face whatever came next the same way they had faced everything together. Years later, when their children asked how their parents had met, Jack would tell the story of the rainy day, of the stubborn blacksmith who refused to stop working, of the shelter he built and the horses he held. Eleanor would add details he forgot, correcting his timeline and embellishing the parts about how handsome he had looked despite being soaked through. But they always agreed on the ending, on the moral of their story. That sometimes love appears when you least expect it, that partnership makes you stronger, and that the best things in life are worth taking risks for. They had built their life together from nothing but hard work, determination, and love, and it was a legacy they were proud to pass on. On warm summer evenings, when the work was done and the children were playing in the yard, Jack and Eleanor would sit on the porch of their house and watch the sun set over their land. Jack would take Eleanor's hand, work-roughened and strong, and she would lean against his shoulder, solid and dependable. And they would sit in the comfortable silence of two people who had found exactly what they needed in each other, grateful for every single day they had together. The ranch continued to prosper into the 1890s. Samuel grew into a fine young man, taking over more of the horse training as Jack's back began to protest the physical demands of breaking and riding. He had his father's patient way with animals and his mother's determination, a combination that served him well. Sarah, true to her bookish nature, became the ranch's unofficial teacher, educating her younger siblings and eventually the children of the ranch hands in reading, writing, and arithmetic. James and Mary were still young but already showing their own distinct personalities and talents. In 1891, Eleanor surprised everyone, including herself, by discovering she was pregnant again at 36. Jack was simultaneously terrified and delighted, worried about the risks but thrilled at the prospect of another child. Their fifth child, a son they named Thomas, was born healthy and strong in early 1892, and Eleanor handled the pregnancy and birth with the same practical competence she brought to everything else. 5 children, Jack said wonderingly, holding baby Thomas while their other 4 children crowded around to see their new brother. "We have 5 children, Eleanor." "I told you I could be persuaded," Eleanor said with a tired smile from the bed. The children adored their baby brother, even teenage Samuel, who pretended to be too grown up for such things, but could often be found making silly faces to make Thomas laugh. The house was chaotic and loud and full of love, everything Eleanor had never known she wanted until Jack had shown her it was possible. As the children grew, they each found their place in the ranch's operation. Samuel took over the horse breeding program entirely by the time he was 18, developing a keen eye for bloodlines and quality that took their stock to a new level. Sarah managed the ranch's books and correspondence, freeing Eleanor to focus on other aspects of running the household and property. James, wild as ever but increasingly responsible as he matured, took charge of the cattle operation. Mary and Thomas were still young but already learning the skills they would need. In 1896, Samuel married a sweet-natured girl named Rebecca from a neighboring ranch, and Jack and Eleanor became grandparents in 1897 when Rebecca gave birth to a daughter. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Eleanor felt the circle complete in a way she had not expected. This tiny girl was the future, the continuation of everything she and Jack had built. "Grandmother," Jack teased that evening after Samuel and Rebecca had taken the baby home to their own cabin on the ranch property. "You are a grandmother now, Eleanor Morrison." "And you are a grandfather, old man," Eleanor shot back, but she was smiling. They were both showing their age now, Eleanor 42 and Jack 45, their faces weathered by sun and wind, their bodies marked by years of hard work. But Eleanor thought they wore it well, that the life they had lived showed in every line and made them who they were. The turn of the century found the Morrison Ranch firmly established as one of the most successful operations in northern Wyoming. They had weathered harsh winters and dry summers, market fluctuations and personal challenges, always together, always supporting each other. Their children were growing into capable adults, ready to take over when the time came. Jack and Eleanor slowly began stepping back from the day-to-day operations, letting Samuel and Sarah and James handle more of the work and decisions. They were not ready to fully retire, but recognized that their children were more than capable. It gave them time to simply enjoy the fruits of their labor, to take rides across their land just for the pleasure of it, to spend long evenings on the porch talking and remembering. "You remember that first day?" Eleanor asked one summer evening in 1902. They were sitting in their favorite spot, watching the sun paint the sky gold and pink. "When you built that shelter in the rain, I remember thinking you were the most stubborn, fascinating woman I had ever met," Jack said with a laugh. "Standing there soaking wet, determined to keep working no matter what, I wanted to help you, but more than that, I wanted to know you." "I did not want to like you," Eleanor admitted. "I was so determined to do everything myself to need no one. You terrified me because you made me want things I thought I could not have." "Like what?" Jack asked softly. "Like this." Eleanor gestured at the ranch spread before them, at the house full of their children and now grandchildren, at the life they had built. "Like love and family and partnership. Like not being alone. You showed me I could be strong and independent while still letting someone love me, still loving someone in return." Jack took her hand, lifting it to kiss her knuckles. You were always strong, Eleanor. You just finally let yourself be happy too. Because of you, Eleanor said. All of this, everything good in my life, started the day you decided to help a stubborn blacksmith in the rain. Best decision I ever made, Jack said simply. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun completed its descent and stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family, Sarah helping Mary with dinner while the men tended to evening chores. Grandchildren's laughter floated on the evening air. It was the sound of home, of love, of a life well lived. Eleanor thought about the scared, determined young woman she had been, working alone in the rain, convinced she had to do everything herself or it did not count. She thought about how wrong she had been, how much richer her life was because she had let Jack in, had trusted him with her heart. They had built something together that was so much more than either of them could have created alone. "Thank you," Eleanor said quietly. "For what?" Jack asked. "For seeing me," Eleanor said. "For loving me. For building me that shelter and everything that came after, for giving me this life." "Eleanor Morrison," Jack said, pulling her close, "loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. You never needed saving, but I am honored that you let me stand beside you anyway." Eleanor leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and knew that whatever years remained to them, they would face them the same way they had faced everything. Together, as partners, as lovers, as the two halves of one remarkable whole. The rain had brought them together all those years ago, and the sun had watched them build a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was not a fairy tale ending because their story had never been a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, built on hard work and honest love and the simple truth that sometimes two people find each other at exactly the right moment and create something extraordinary. Eleanor had no regrets, only gratitude for every single day, from that first rainy September morning to this perfect summer evening and all the days in between. The years continued their march, bringing changes both expected and unexpected. Sarah married in 1903, a teacher from the growing town of Sheridan who appreciated her intelligence and shared her love of books. James married in 1905, bringing another daughter-in-law into the family. Mary, spirited and independent like her mother, declared she would not marry unless she found someone who respected her need to be more than just a wife, and Eleanor and Jack supported her completely. Young Thomas, growing tall and strong, showed promise of becoming an even better horseman than Samuel. By 1908, Jack and Eleanor had 7 grandchildren, with more on the way. The original house had been expanded again to accommodate family gatherings, and the ranch now employed a dozen hands year-round. It was more successful than Jack had ever imagined that day when the lawyer had tracked him down with news of his inheritance. "We built something good," Jack said to Eleanor on their 30th anniversary. He was 55 now, his hair mostly silver, moving a bit slower than he once did but still strong. "Something that will last beyond us." "We did," Eleanor agreed. She was 53, her hands still strong despite arthritis beginning in her fingers, her hair threaded with gray but her eyes as sharp as ever. "Our children know how to work hard, how to build something meaningful. They will take care of the ranch and each other." "We should tell them the whole story," Jack said suddenly. "About how we met, about your father's smithy, about taking the risk to come here. They should know where they come from." So they gathered the family that evening, children and grandchildren alike, and told them the story. They talked about Eleanor's father teaching her to be a blacksmith despite convention, about the rainy day that brought Jack into her life, about the decision to leave the security of the smithy for the uncertainty of ranching. They talked about the hard years and the good ones, about what it meant to be partners in every sense. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, fascinated by stories of their grandmother as a blacksmith and their grandfather building shelter in the rain. The adult children heard details they had never known, understanding their parents' relationship in a deeper way. "So you just decided to help her?" Samuel asked his father. Even though you did not know her, she needed help, Jack said simply, and I wanted to know her. Sometimes life gives you a moment where you can make a choice that changes everything. I chose to build that shelter, chose to stay, chose to love your mother. Best choices I ever made. And you let him help you, Rebecca said to Eleanor, wonder in her voice. Even though you had been doing everything alone. Learning to accept help was one of the hardest and most important things I ever did, Eleanor said. I thought needing someone made me weak. Your grandfather taught me that real strength is knowing when to stand alone and when to stand together. The evening stretched late, filled with stories and laughter and the deep contentment of family gathered in love. When everyone finally dispersed to their own homes or to bed, Jack and Eleanor were left alone in the quiet house. That was good, Eleanor said, banking the fire. They should know their history. Our legacy, Jack corrected, coming to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Not just land and horses and cattle, but the knowledge that taking risks for love is always worth it. Eleanor turned in his arms, studying the face she knew better than her own. 53 years old and still beautiful to her, still the same man who had built her a shelter in the rain and offered to hold her horses. I would do it all again, she said softly. Every single moment exactly the same. Me too, Jack said, kissing her forehead. Though maybe with a bit less rain at the start. Eleanor laughed, the sound young and free despite her years. The rain was perfect, it brought you to me. They stood together in the quiet house, surrounded by evidence of their life together, and Eleanor felt nothing but peace. She had traveled so far from that rainy day in Cheyenne, from the lonely young woman who thought she had to face the world alone. Jack had shown her a different path, one of love and partnership and shared dreams. Together they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy written in land and family, and the enduring power of two people who chose each other every single day. The story could have ended there, a perfect picture of contentment, but life continued, bringing its mix of joy and sorrow. In 1912, Eleanor's hands finally forced her to acknowledge that her smithing days were truly behind her, the arthritis making it painful to grip tools or do fine work. But she found new purpose in teaching her grandchildren, passing on the knowledge her father had given her. Jack developed a persistent cough in 1914 that worried Eleanor, but he stubbornly refused to slow down. It took Samuel and Sarah staging an intervention to finally make him see a doctor, who diagnosed exhaustion and insisted on rest. Jack protested but eventually surrendered to Eleanor's firm insistence that he let their children handle the ranch while he recovered. The enforced rest turned out to be a blessing. For the first time in decades, Jack and Eleanor had time just to be together without the constant demands of work. They took gentle rides across the ranch, Jack showing Eleanor places he had discovered over the years that she had never seen. They read together in the evenings, Eleanor's voice bringing stories to life while Jack listened with eyes closed. They talked for hours, remembering and dreaming, sharing the kind of deep intimacy that only decades of partnership could create. I am not ready to leave you, Jack said one evening, the words coming out of nowhere but making perfect sense. Then do not, Eleanor said fiercely. Stay with me, we have more years ahead of us yet. And so he did. Jack recovered his strength slowly, learning to pace himself, to let go of the need to do everything himself. He became the ranch's patriarch in truth, offering wisdom and guidance while their children handled the physical work. Eleanor became the family's heart, the one everyone came to with problems or joys, the steady presence that held them together. More grandchildren arrived and then great-grandchildren. The family tree expanded, branches growing strong from the roots Jack and Eleanor had planted. The ranch prospered through good years and survived the difficult ones. Through it all, Jack and Eleanor remained partners, their love deepening with each passing year until it was woven into the very fabric of who they were. In 1925, they celebrated their 46th anniversary surrounded by 4 generations of family. Jack was 72, Eleanor 69, both showing their age but still vital, still present. The house and yard overflowed with their descendants, more than 50 people who existed because of the choice Jack had made to build a shelter in the rain and Eleanor's choice to let him into her heart. "Look at what we made," Jack said to Eleanor, watching their family gathered before them. "All of this from one rainy day." "No," Eleanor corrected gently. "All of this from choosing each other every day after that rainy day. That is what built this, Jack, our daily choice to love and support and partner with each other." "Then I am grateful for every single one of those days," Jack said, taking her hand. "And for every day still to come." They were granted another decade together, years of watching their family continue to grow and thrive. They saw Samuel's children take over major portions of the ranch operation. They saw Sarah become a published author, writing about ranch life and Wyoming history. They saw James expand the cattle operation beyond anything they had imagined. They saw Mary finally marry, at 43, a widower who appreciated her independence and made her genuinely happy. They saw Thomas become one of the most respected horse breeders in the state, carrying on Jack's legacy with skill and passion. Jack passed peacefully in his sleep on a summer night in 1935, 82 years old and surrounded by family. Eleanor held his hand as he slipped away, whispering her love and gratitude for the extraordinary life they had shared. The grief was profound, losing the man who had been her partner for 56 years. But it was softened by the knowledge that they had lived fully, loved completely, and left a legacy that would endure. Eleanor lived another 4 years, spending her final days surrounded by the family she and Jack had created. She never stopped talking about him, keeping his memory alive in stories shared with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She made sure they understood what he had meant, not just to her but to all of them, the foundation he had helped build. She died in the spring of 1939, 84 years old, in the bedroom of the house she and Jack had built together. Her children and grandchildren were with her, and her last words were about that rainy day in September 1878 when a cowboy had offered to build her shelter and changed everything. "He saw me," she whispered to Sarah, who held her hand. "Your father saw me for who I really was and loved me anyway." That is the greatest gift anyone can give. Remember that. Find someone who sees you and loves what they see. They buried Eleanor beside Jack on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The entire family gathered, 4 generations mourning the woman who had been their rock, their teacher, their example of strength and love combined. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of Jack and Eleanor's descendants. They faced depressions and wars, droughts and hardships, but they endured because they had been taught how to work together, how to support each other, how to choose love even when it was difficult. The story of the rainy day became family legend, told and retold until everyone knew it by heart. The original shelter Jack had built that September day was long gone, but its memory remained. It became a symbol of what was possible when someone reached out in kindness and someone else chose to accept that kindness. It represented the foundation of everything the Morrison family had become. Decades later, in the 21st century, Jack and Eleanor's great-great-grandchildren would still be working the ranch, still raising horses and cattle, still telling the story of the blacksmith and the cowboy who found each other in the rain. The house had been expanded and modernized, but the original section that Jack and Eleanor had built still stood, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. And on rainy days, when storms rolled across the Wyoming plains, the family would remember. They would think about Eleanor working in the downpour, stubborn and determined and alone. They would think about Jack building shelter, offering help, choosing to stay. They would think about the love that grew from that moment, the partnership that built an empire, the legacy that endured. It was a story about strength and vulnerability, independence and interdependence, the courage to work alone and the wisdom to know when to accept partnership. It was about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something extraordinary from nothing but hard work and honest love. The rain had brought them together, but it was their daily choice to love each other that made them legendary. That was the lesson they passed down through generations, the true legacy of that September day in 1878. Love was not just a feeling but a choice, made new each morning, honored through action, deepened through shared trials and triumphs. Jack and Eleanor Morrison had understood that truth and lived it fully, and their descendants carried it forward like a torch passed from hand to hand across the years. Their story ended not with death, but with continuation, with the family they had created carrying on their values and dreams. In that way, they achieved a kind of immortality, living on in the hearts and actions of everyone who came after them. The cowboy who built a shelter in the rain and the blacksmith who let him help had created something that transcended their mortal lives, a legacy of love that would endure as long as their family remembered. And they would remember, always, the rainy day that changed everything. The day when reaching out in kindness and accepting help with grace created ripples that spread across generations. The day two lonely people found each other and chose to build a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, until those days and choices added up to something beautiful and enduring and true. That was the real ending, not death but continuation, not loss but legacy, not an ending at all but a story that would be told and retold, inspiring and guiding, reminding everyone who heard it that love combined with courage can build empires that last forever.